behind it. So let's start it. Sorry. Design to the console. Nice. All right, so click on Amazon Redshift. I'll do create cluster, even though I already have some. And I think we have to do production. We can do a smaller number of nodes. Like this one is cheaper, right? You can see how expensive these ones are. But this one's, I guess, fairly cheap too. RAX plus 0.024, 0.025. I think this is the one I've done. But I'm sure you can do one of these other ones is fine too. And then I can probably do just one node. Node is like, you can imagine, like this is another distributed database. So node is like the number of different machines that actually run Redshift on this. I'll do like a quick diagram for you all. So the way Redshift works, there's this, when you submit a command to Redshift, and we'll go into more details about this towards the end of the course. My experience is like generally people like forget some of this like conceptual stuff. So like I said, I'll delay sending out the readings for this till the end, but it's worth just quickly going through. So when you do something like, select all from states or something like that, right? What that does is that will issue a command to really like this. I forget if it's called the controller or the master, but this guy receives the command, and then we'll distribute the command across two different machines or however many of nodes. So that let's say this is node number 1 and node number 2. What you can do is you can actually have your data split up across these two different computers, and it's not only a way for you to like store more data, but also then when you say select all from states, let's say you say where, like region is Midwest, well, you can issue that command simultaneously, right, across both machines. So that means like this guy finds its results and this other machine finds its results. They both send back their results to the controller, who then sends back its results to you. All right. So this is, just another example of like parallel computing. It's also, you might hear it as map reduce. The mapping part is that each machine is performing the same operation simultaneously. Okay, the reducing part is then they combine their results. They send back the results and send you a combined tally. All right. So that's the general idea. And that's why, you get this option of a number of nodes. All right. So, all right, number of nodes is 1. We won't have to, so this admin username, right, this is the username for you to like log in with, like when we do like a PSQL command, this is the database name that you would be logging in with, or the name of the user to the database that you would be logging in with. And this is that user's password you would create, so we can do Jigsaw Labs. So the IAM roles, right, there's two different things I asked you to set. So for this one, the IAM roles, you can just do that here. And for the configuration, right, you can do that just by unchecking defaults. For the IAM roles, right, the whole idea, there's two different things that we really want to do. So let me do this whiteboard again. All right, if this is our instance, so this is our database. Let me draw it better. Sorry about that. All right, so this is our database. This is Redshift. There's two different things we need to do. One is we have Redshift, and then we also have S3. Right, this is where we store our files. And then we also have like our terminal, our laptop. All right, this is the laptop. So one thing we need to do is just allow our laptop to access Redshift. And that's our security group, all right, which we're going to say basically give any computer access to that with this all zeros thing, right? Any IP address, we want to enable access to it. The other thing we want to do is we want to allow Redshift to copy data, from S3. Remember, this S3 is going to have like a CSV file here that maybe has like some data. And so we're going to ask Redshift to copy data from S3. And if we don't give it the permissions to do so, it won't have that ability. So this thing here is like with that role, we're going to create a role for this. And this thing here, so the role is to enable access to S3. The security group is to set up a firewall such that our laptop can access Redshift. Does that make sense? Right? We need to, one, enable our computer to access Redshift, and two, we need to enable Redshift to access data from this Dropbox-like feature. Yeah? So to do that, we have the role, and you can see, I guess, I created, this is the role, not the security, so the role comes first, I guess. You can see for this Redshift role, this one, we've given it Amazon S3 read access, right? So this gives it the ability to read data from S3. And then the other thing we're doing here is the security group, right? So even if you have this default security group, you better make sure that it allows access to the right IP addresses, or you can create a new one. I can use this existing Redshift security group. We've done it enough. I think that's fine. And I also make this publicly accessible. So this allows clients from outside my virtual private compute. So this means from outside your personal Amazon ecosystem, your AWS ecosystem, we're allowing things like my computer, my laptop, to access this. So we're doing both here. Okay. If we did if we could do create a new security group, I'm not quite sure how. I actually don't see it here. So we will use the Redshift one. Maybe we would have to create one beforehand. Right, and then we can do create cluster. All right, I don't think we need any of these other things. Right, this is giving you an initial database. The port number, this is good, the default. Maintenance window, I don't think we need to worry about that. It means which version of the cluster is applied. Monitoring, we don't have to worry about that. Backup for our purpose. You can see that you can take a backup of your data, right, and store it, but we don't need to do that. And then we would do create cluster, and that would create our cluster. All right, so that's any tricky things you all ran into when creating your Redshift cluster?
Yeah, I had to make a subnet before. Once I did that, it worked. It had to connect to this subnet thing where it was East Region 1 Virginia stuff.
Yeah, I wonder if it was. Yeah, I think that so one thing you may have, there is a security groups. Is it under VPC? Right, and then you can create a security group. I'm not sure if maybe it just had to be under the same subnet. I'm not quite sure exactly what was going on there. but you may have to first create a security group, right, that has, right, and here's the VPC. Generally, you can really only have, a VPC is kind of like, back in the old days before AWS, this was like, you used to have all the servers, all the computers stored in the building, right? And the idea, and that was like your private, computes and your private machines. And the idea is this is that same concept in Amazon. These are your private resources. So you want these things inside your private cloud, okay? Right, and then of course we do the inbound rule to allow on port, right, 5439, or we could probably look for Redshift as well. You can see that sets it to port 5439 from any one of these, right? Okay. So once you create this and we give this a name like Redshift Security Group, then once we create this, right, then we should be able to associate it with our Redshift instance over here. But yeah, I'm not quite sure what was happening with your specific thing, Sina. All right, so that's that. That's setting up Redshift. The other thing. The other thing is, now once we have Redshift set up, the next reading talks about, well, how do we pull data from S3? So let me just show you kind of why we're doing this. It's kind of backwards. Well, just in terms of how we teach it. Remember that we start off with our data really in like our OLTP. This is Postgres. And what we're going to do is we're going to export the data from Postgres to S3. So we'll like export, and we did show that, right? Like how we can select the data, coerce it, and then we could export it as a CSV, and then we would upload that CSV to S3. And then from here, with Redshift, we would copy data from S3 over to Redshift. All right. So that's what we have to do next. Now that we set up Redshift, the next step is, okay, copy data from S3 over to Redshift. Remember, we already did one step, which was to set a role that has, on Redshift, that has S3 access. We did that. If you kind of look at this thing, like this is my Redshift cluster. So this one I enable access to. If you click on it and click on, I think, properties. Yeah, you can see this. Here's my, okay, it's publicly enabled. Here it is. Here's my Redshift role. Remember, this Redshift role has Amazon S3 access. So this is what allows my database, my analytics database, to access S3. Then here's like what's next is, so we have this Redshift cluster. We can click on it. We can see that it has, if we go to properties again, actually we don't even need to go there. We can see up here with the endpoint, this is how we can access it, right? And we can connect to it. Now, one thing that might be confusing is we want to connect to it using our Scicop G2 library, because it's basically running Postgres software in this database. One thing that's confusing is like with Scicop G2, you can see the format we're doing is the endpoint, the name of the database, the port, the user, the password. All right? Only this part, the part before the colon, is the endpoint. In other words, by endpoint, we mean the URL where we can access this at. Right here is the port, 5439, right? And then this part after the slash is the database. So you may have to separate this out, right? Here's the endpoint. Here's the database. Here's the port. And then, the user and password that you set when we first created Redshift. then we can connect. Let's just take a look. I think I already have, the first thing you would do would be like create this table for zip codes. And this way we can, pull in Redshift, and this way we can pull a CSV file over from our S3 and load it into this empty table. I think I already have it. Let's do cursor.execute, select all from zip codes, and then we'll do cursor.fetch all. Oh, shoot. I already have this thing populated. Let's delete them. Okay, if I want to delete all my data, I'll do delete just from zip codes. And then the next thing I have to do, it can't be cursor, right? Because I'm changing the data when I delete. I'm not just querying, I'm like doing just something destructive. So I have to say connection.commit. Okay? Now if I relook at this, it will say cursor.execute, select all from zip codes, and then let's do a fetch all. All right, so now we have this empty. We still do have the, table is there, so this is good. And now the next thing we need to do is copy our data from the copy data into the zip codes data table from S3. So let me show you. If you look at S3, maybe I'll just go here. All right, if you look at my S3, you can see we have these different buckets, right? These are basically folders. And then if we click on Jigsaw Lab Student, we say here's my zip codes.csv. You can just upload data, like by just dragging in and dropping that data there. Okay. So click on, it's a little bit more complicated than that. There is a lesson that goes through it, but you can at least upload it, and then to access it programmatically, that takes a little more work, but to start, this is fine. And you can see it gives you a URL where this lives, right? We just downloaded it by clicking on the URL. And this is just a CSV file, right? You can see that. The other thing that it has is it has this Amazon resource name, right? This is kind of this is like, the name, the kind of like the ID for it. And then the other thing I'm looking for, I guess the reading has it, is this, the Amazon resource name, and then it has this part right here. Let me see if I can find that. So here's my Redshift role. I'm gonna have to go back to AWS. Click on S3. Let's see if I should be able to find this. Click on Jigsaw Lab Student. Click on the zip codes. Maybe it's under permissions. And now I'll have to find it for you all. S3 URI properties. Yeah. I know the reading talks about how to access it. I'll have to figure that out. But you can, on the website, it will give you not only like, it will give you this part. Oh, you know what I'm looking for? This is what I'm looking for. Let's go to the Redshift role. This is where it should be. Sorry about that. If we go to the Redshift role, here's properties. Let's see if I look for role. We'll click on this Redshift role. Okay. This is what I'm looking for. This part right here, this is what has permission, right? This is what has permission to access S3. Okay? So this is what we're going to provide. And you can do that just by copying this right here. So to get this, right, you can just go to your Redshift instance, click on properties, and then go down and click on this Redshift role. Once you get there, this is like on behalf of, like we are accessing S3, like with permission of this guy. this Redshift role, right, who has Amazon S3 access. So you copy this and you place that in here. These are your credentials, right? You can see it's exactly the same thing. It's just that we put quotation marks around this. So our credentials are, here's my AWS IAM role, and then we just copy and paste this part. And this is the thing that has access to S3. So now we can copy zip codes, copy into my zip codes table from our S3 bucket on behalf of, right, this Redshift role. And now we're saying, you know, there's commas, comma separated values, that's the delimiter. And the ignore header is because, remember that first row in the CSV file has something like ID, right, code, city ID, right? So we want to ignore this part right here and start at the second row that has like 1, 1, 0, 2, 7, 8, and then city ID is like 2, right? So we're saying ignore header 1 row. And I believe this is I think they're probably both in the same availability network, but I'm not sure. This probably is the S3 bucket, the region. All right, so with that command, we can copy into my zip codes table from this S3 file, all right, on behalf of this guy right here. And we're ignoring the header, ignore the first row, and have a delimiter, right, of comma separated values. Because we're inserting the data, we have to commit it, and now you can see the data. All right? One thing annoying about Redshift, I don't know if this has improved, and I don't think it has, is that if you run into an error, like for instance here, you can see what I'm doing is I forgot to put in the ignore header as 1. All right, ignore the first row. So if I copy over the data, it's going to break because it's going to say, hey, you're trying to copy over like this text into an integer field. Like how do I insert into, you know, this first row of text, right, when it's just integers? So if I do this, this right, we don't have the ignore header. We get an error, and it says, it doesn't tell us the error message. It says, check the STL load errors table for details of the error message. Okay? To make your life more complicated, you can't, I don't believe at this point, just run this query. Let's see if you can. Okay. Because remember, once you run into an error here, you have to reinitialize your connection to Postgres, and then you can run this query. So let's go to the top, reinitialize my connection in a cursor, and now, because it stores the error message in a table, I can just select from that table. You can see I'm ordering by like the query number, descending, and you can see I'm selecting like various columns from there, from this table. The last one right here is my error reason. What is the issue? Cursor.fetch all. So you can now you can start to see this, what's going on. Invalid digit value I. So this is what's throwing it off, is this value I, which was like the ID, right? Position 0, right? This is like I'm guessing like the row or the column. Right? And then it says, hey, the type is integer, right? And we're trying to put in on I. So you can interpret this stuff. It's just not quite as easy. And in order to do that, you have to query. If you want to see more from it, remember this is like a substring. So I'm trying to slice the parts that are most relevant for you, but you can, make this slice bigger or smaller portions. All right. But this is how you read the errors, as far as I know, from Redshift. All right, so that's really what I wanted to go through with all of you, right? The one thing is just setting up Redshift. I think a lot of you did that last class. And then the second thing is, copying data from S3 using this authorized like Redshift role, okay? And then we just talked about like debugging, and the fact that it is a bit roundabout to do this. Anything to go over, right? Because what I'll deploy is this section, which is, go through, this is the reading we just went through, and then here's the corresponding lab. And then finally, this is moving data from our original OLTP over to S3, and then I think like completing the cycle. All right. All right, questions before we move into breakout rooms?